Welcome to Someone's Gotta Drive. I want to give a trigger warning that this has to deal with parental addiction, childhood trauma, and may be triggering to some. In our last episode, I was telling you about how my boyfriend and I were getting ready to get married and ended with my mom was almost on death's door. My boyfriend and I left the warehouse that day, asked someone in our family to watch our dog, and proceeded to make our way to the hospital that my mother stayed at. My mom had already been in the hospital for about 24 hours. They had stuck an NG tube down her nose to try to clear her bowel blockage, and it wasn't working. And we had been doing this almost every month at this point for close to 8 years. At some point, we knew it wasn't going to work. And today was the day. Doctors are going through, stacks of medical records of my mother's. The more time goes on, the more my mother's belly gets distended, and the more it comes to risk that her bowels will rupture, causing sepsis and causing her to die. So doctors at this point are now asking us about her medical history, which is almost uncanny because we kind of felt like this woman has been in your hospital probably every month. You should know her medical history by now. But her medical file is so big, they can't get through it in time. So they're asking us, does your mother suffer from liver failure? And my sister goes, yes, I just took her to the doctor recently for her being jaundiced. She was just in this hospital 2 weeks ago for her being jaundiced. And my mother goes, nope, I don't have liver failure. Do you have history of drug addiction? No, I don't have history of drug addiction. Meanwhile, my sister's fighting her. I just tried getting you in rehab for snorting 210 milligrams of OxyContin up your nose. So now is this battle royale between my mother and my sister, and the doctors are literally in the middle, as the doctors are trying to ask all the medical questions and prep for surgery. My mother is lying to the doctors straight-faced. My sister is calling her out on it, and I'm sitting there going, yeah, I know where this is going. Nowhere. And at that moment, my mother had us blacklisted from her medical records moving forward. That anything that happened, the doctors were not allowed to talk to us. They were not allowed to give us any test results, nothing of the sort. And part of it was because my mother was saying one thing, my sister saying another. And honestly, I would have believed my sister before my mother. Because 2 weeks prior to this, my mother was in the hospital for being jaundiced. And we weren't sure what it was, whether it was alcohol or the drugs that she was. We couldn't tell you because my mother was that kind of secretive. The problem with me moving out was that there was no one to blame it on anymore. There was no one to hide it. My mom could sit there and try to say I did something wrong. And then all of a sudden, all the attention was on me. But that wasn't the case anymore because I didn't live at home. And honestly, I didn't really talk to her that much. And this was why. Oftentimes when you called my mom, she would start slurring her speech. You would tell that she was high or drunk, and you're just like, okay, bye. Well, now my mother looks like she's 11 months pregnant and honestly on death's door. Her arms were super skinny. Her belly was super huge. And, she couldn't eat anything, but she was taking all the drugs like there was no tomorrow. So they rush her into surgery. And after about 6 hours of surgery, they were able to remove about 4 feet of small intestine. And they went ahead and stitched her up on the inside, but didn't stitch her up on the outside. I remember being in the waiting room and the doctor coming out, never saying our name, just coming out, looking around, and then walking back in. It was like 4 or 6 in the morning that we finally were like, hey, where's my mom? Like, where's the doctor? What's going on here? And they were like, oh, yeah, she's been in recovery for hours. Great. Can someone tell us what's going on? No, the doctor went home for the day. Fantastic. Honestly, you probably should go home too. She is stable. But what we can tell you is that we did not stitch up her skin, like her outside. Her intestines and everything is still showing because we're worried that the stitches to attach her bowels together will rupture because she is so malnourished that they're probably going to rupture. And so we went back home, got a little bit of sleep. Later on that afternoon, I decided to go back to the hospital and go check on my mom. She was attached to 16 different monitors. I counted it. She was in medicinally induced coma. But when you're in those medicinally induced comas, you also still twitch and things like that, in which doing that, she had made the cover that was over her slide down. And I saw everything, all of her intestines, her organs, everything. And in that moment, I was like, I am 21 years old. I'm not supposed to be losing my mother. We're supposed to be planning a wedding. That's what we're supposed to be doing. And I was so upset. I was just upset at the world. I was upset at God. Why can't I have a normal mother? Why can't I have a normal life where girls my age are either coming out of college, planning their weddings, the whole 9 yards with their mothers by their side? A day or two later, we got a call that my mother had been pushed into emergency surgery. The stitches had indeed ruptured. And the only way to save her life was to hook her up to an ileostomy bag. And that's what they did. She stayed in that medically induced coma for about 2 weeks. We kept the TV on because they insisted that she should be able to hear things. Anytime we spoke as if she was awake and alive and in the room. She was alive. She was in the room. We just didn't know if she was awake. And we watched her heal. 16 monitors turned to 8, turned to 4, turned to 2. And eventually she woke up from that medicinally induced coma. She wasn't able to speak due to the ventilator that she had been put on. But when she could, the first thing she asked me was, "Why did you let me live?" And one of the things that we had been trying to explain to my mother for years is that whenever you overdose, whenever you don't care for yourself and you put yourself in a precarious situation, and we find you in that precarious situation, it is our job to save your life. Because if not, we could be charged with potential manslaughter or reckless endangerment or anything else that you could possibly think of. And even though you can't help someone who doesn't want to be helped, you also can't let them die. She didn't have a living will. She wasn't a DNR. My dad knew exactly the legalities he had to face. And in that moment, it broke my heart. Why would you expect your child to let you die? No matter how much we didn't get along, no matter how much we went through, I wasn't going to let her die. Not unless she made it explicitly clear in legal documentation what her final wishes were. And it was during this time that she had been in a medicinal coma and my whole family was together at the hospital. that, my dad started giving us the stories. Apparently, Mom had kicked him out of their bedroom. He came home one day from work and found his stuff in my old bedroom. She kicked him out of the bedroom. And when I had been kicked out of the house and I said, just you wait, you're going to come home from work one day and all your stuff's going to be out. Guess what? I was right. And when we started discussing his family, he had told me, my brothers told me not to adopt you, not to take on someone else's problem. Well, that would make sense on why I never really felt like I belonged. Meanwhile, when he says these things, he goes, but you're my girl. You're my daughter. You'll always be my baby girl. And as a family, we stuck together to help him through this situation because it wasn't easy. Oftentimes at this point, we were told she could die any day. And boy, does that bring up some childhood traumas from when you were younger and being told your mother could die any day. Well, now it's really real. And you have no idea how many times I would pray to the Lord above to end her suffering, to end all of our suffering. So that way she could finally be at peace. But God obviously had a different path. And when she woke up from her medically induced coma, the first thing she said was, why did you let me live? And part of it was because of her vanity. Now she could not use her body the same way that everyone else could. She would not poop the way everyone else does. She now has this bag. And now everyone can see her poop literally shooting out of her. With 4 feet of small intestine removed, and a little bit more even on top of that removed, so that way to create the ileostomy, she had very little small intestine left. And the small intestine absorbs a lot of the nutrients that you eat. Your stomach breaks it down. It goes through the duct and the pancreatic and bile ducts and all that, and filters through your liver. But it's your small intestine that absorbs the water and the food and the nutrients and the things that you consume. And with that being said, my mother now had to go on something called TPN, because anything that she took by mouth was pretty much going straight out of her. There wasn't enough small intestine to absorb it. So we started that path. And for the next 6.5 years of her life, she was on TPN, which is a nutritional bag that most cancer patients will use, or other types of patients will use to help keep the nutrients that they need and help sustain their life. Some people live on this for 6 months. Some people live on it for 20 years. It just varies and depends. And over a matter of about 2 months, my mother remained in the hospital, gradually getting better and better and better. In the meantime, we decided to put the wedding planning off for a little bit while we went through this. After that, my mother went into a rehab facility, and that was a disaster. She was supposed to be on all liquid medications, which they did not have. They would give it to her in pill form, which she couldn't absorb because she didn't have the small intestine to do so. They were also, for some reason, the doctors were limiting her liquid intake, which then caused her kidneys to also fail. The rehab facility did not take very good care of my mother. We were trying to go there every day to make sure that she had what she needed, that she was cared for, everything else. But we couldn't administer her medication. We couldn't provide the medication to her. They had to do it. And they weren't doing it in the right way. A few days later, ambulance is being called, and the president of this rehab facility is literally over top of my mother, combing her hair and trying to make her look good before going back to the hospital. And from that moment on, we decided we would never send my mother back to another rehab facility again. She got back to the hospital, in which we decided we're just going to bring her home. My dad found an in-home caregiver who worked about 40 hours a week. In between, my sister and I were also coming to help care for her, to help give my dad a little bit of a break. Because he would go to work, he would come home, he would, alleviate the caregiver, and then it was all him. All that evening, all that night. At this point, her drug addiction wasn't on our radar at all. We were more concerned with just trying to make sure that we could stay on top of her medical needs, giving her TPN every night, calculating her blood sugars and her blood pressures and everything else that you could possibly think of, that the last thing that any of us were thinking about was really all the pain medication. Because at this point, they had put her on fentanyl patches because they had to break her ribs or crack her ribs in order to do the surgery, which caused a lot of pain. On top of that, they put her on a lot of other pain medications. But one of the things they did tell her was, if you want your bowels reattached, you're going to have to get off of the pain medication. And we will wean you off of it. But that is how you're going to get your bowels reattached. And so my mother's goal was exactly that, to get her bowels reattached so that way she could use her body like everyone else does. One of the things that no one actually tells you about these type of surgeries with bowel obstructions and ileostomies is that they will also pack your other bowels with packing or, surgical packing. And so she still had to pass that naturally. And that's what she was doing while she was at home. She had to get up and walk around and get that stuff moving and out. And once that was done, that was done. And it was painful for her. But what was also painful for her was that she felt like she could not live a life like everyone else because she had this ileostomy. So that was what I was starting to do. I would take her shopping. I would take her for a walk. I would take her to the river. I would take her wherever she wanted to go. We would just go for a drive. Why not? What's stopping you? We can do anything. Just because you have an ileostomy bag doesn't stop you. If anything, we saved your life. Go live it. So I would work Monday through Friday. I would take either Saturday or Sunday, and I would go over to my parents' house, and I would help take care of my mother and, take her shopping, get her out of the house, do all the things. And then the next week, my sister would come up and she would do that. And so every other week we were trading off, trying to do our best there. And my dad appreciated it because that meant one day out of the week, maybe he didn't have to come straight home from work. Maybe he could go do something else and just get away from the house for a bit and get away from reality. And while this is going on, we also decided to start planning the wedding. Once again, we saved your life, right? As much as you didn't want us to, so let's start living it. I bought a dress from someone, and my dad put together the whole reception. I didn't have a say in it. I just, here you go, you can do it. My dad was really great with that kind of stuff. He puts together this 4th of July party every year that everyone raves about. If anything, he had hoped that we did it on 4th of July so he could just combine the two parties. So, started talking to the preacher and getting our date set. It wasn't too bad. Wedding planning wasn't really too bad. And honestly, my mother was starting to look forward to something. But then at home, things weren't exactly being so great. all my boyfriend would pretty much do is play video games. That wasn't really a problem. But then we would argue. And we would argue about all sorts of random things. And one day, with everything that had been going on, my uncle had actually asked me to take him to the doctor. He was having outpatient surgery done to have some arthritis removed from his knee. And I get him back home, and he said to me, "There's just something up. I just don't know if you should be getting married yet." And I'm like, "I don't understand what you're talking about. What do you mean something's up?" And he's like, "Look, you're the one with the car. You're the one that's working. You're the one with the drive. You're caring for your mother." He's kind of, I hate to say it, but he's kind of lazy. He's only got this job because you got him this job. You've always cared for him. You've always taken care of him. I don't know. Something just doesn't seem right. And I was thinking about it. And I hadn't had much to eat that day. And I had myself a beer. And I go home and thought it would be a good idea to talk to him about this. And said, after a while of thinking about it, yes, we had a date set. Things were in motion to a certain degree, but not all the food had been bought. We can change the date. We can hold off. We can say we're not doing this right now. There's still too much going on with my mom. And I was like trying to talk to him and say, you know what? I don't know, man. I don't know if we should be getting married. We're young. There's so much going on. Like, I don't know. And he looked at me and said, "Either we're getting married or this is over right now." I was given an ultimatum right that second. And I said, can we think about this? Can we talk about this? Like, my mother and all of her medical issues have been all consuming. And some people are telling me, I don't know if you should get married. And I don't understand exactly where it's coming from, but deep down in the pit of my stomach, something's telling me I should listen. I'm not saying that we should break up. I'm just saying, can we hold off on the wedding? And it was, no, you wanted this. This is what you wanted. You forced me into this. I now have family members coming. They have their plane tickets booked. You cannot change it. If you change it, then we are over. We are done right now. And we had one of those blow up fights that when I went to try to walk away and walk it off, he locked me in a room and said, "No, you're not going anywhere until you calm down." He lit up a blunt and handed it to me and said, "You're going to smoke this until you calm down, and you are not allowed out of this room until you calm down." And he literally sat there with me in a room until I calmed down and said, "Okay, we'll get married." And it was right then and there that I knew I was going to be getting a divorce. Maybe not today. Obviously not today. I still had to go through with the wedding. But something told me that with his temper and his attitude, we weren't going to last.